France 24's Oliver Farry is on set with us now to take a look back over the last 12 months of this conflict. Oliver, it was an invasion that nobody but the White House said would happen, but it had long-standing roots, didn't it?
Yes, Russia has been involved in Ukraine since its annexation of Crimea in 2014, and this was there was also the establishment of two separate pro-Moscow separatist republics set there as well in Donetsk. These regions we can see in pink on the map. The first signs of war started in Kiev at about 5 a.m. 1 year ago. There were plumes of smoke above the Ukrainian capital. Russian troops entered Ukraine from the north, from Belarus, and expected to take Kiev within a number of hours. We had but an overthrow President Vladimir Zelensky. The city's Hostomel airport was one of the prime targets, as we can see here. But the Ukrainian army put up unexpected resistance. The Russians did manage to take the airport, but it was of little use once it had been damaged in the fighting. And it was already clear from the first 24 hours of the offensive that Moscow had underestimated Ukraine's capacity to resist. Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, was another front. It's the second city, 1.4 million people. Its history largely intertwined with Russia's here, but there was also strong resistance. In Kharkiv, we saw the first signs of civilian buildings being targeted. This was something that would become a feature of the war. The southern offensive launched from Crimea started with the taking of Kherson, which was the sole city to surrender without any fighting. And in the east, where Russia already had a foothold, there was a violent battle in the city of Svierodonetsk, which would last until June. And from early on, there was a nuclear threat. On the fourth day of the invasion, Vladimir Putin put Russia's nuclear deterrent forces on standby, and there were also threats to nuclear power plants, such as in Chernobyl in the north, and also Zaporizhia, Europe's largest, in the south. Now, in early April, with the Kiev offensive, in early April, with the Kiev offensive a failure, Russian troops withdrew, and the first massacres attributed by Ukraine to Russian forces were revealed. This we can see in Bucha. There were an estimated 1,000 civilians killed there. Some of them had their hands bound, suggesting they'd been summarily executed from late February. There was the city of Mariupol on the Black Sea was subject to massive bombing, and entire neighbourhoods were destroyed. More than 50,000 civilians fled, according to Ukraine. And there was also the doomed resistance of Ukrainian fighters, particularly in the Avostal factory there.
So Ukraine had a successful autumn, winning back a number of strategic cities.
That's right. The battle for Kharkiv province was the start of the Ukrainian counter-offensive. While Ukrainian troops were massed here in the south, they took the Russians by surprise in the east by Kharkiv. In just a few days, they regained 3,000 square kilometres of terrain east of Kharkiv. And Izium was one of the main cities that was liberated. There too, there was also evidence of exactions on civilian population there. In the south, there was another counter-offensive, not quite so successful. Russian troops were pushed back, the supply lines disrupted by Ukrainian bombings, and Kherson was retaken. Some 2,500 soldiers surrendered between 18th and 20th of May.
And what about now, 1 year on? What is the lie of the land? Is there a likelihood of either side winning this war?
Well, there is pretty much bogged down in a quagmire. In the east, in Bakhmut is the main area. It's a town that's more symbolic than strategic. It has been fought over. Both Ukrainian and Russian forces are massed on the lines in the east and the south. There's not really much progress being made. And certainly we can see that Ukraine is very reliant upon increased arms from the west, and also it's hoping to get F-16 fighter jets and other jets like that from the West, and particularly the United States, while Russia is probably hoping that it can at least stem the flow for another few months and frustrate Ukraine and keep it going for a bit longer until maybe perhaps support for Ukraine in the West diminishes.
Oliver Farry, thank you for that.